Hello, Jason here again, and today I want to talk about something that's been on my mind, well, for a very long time now. It's been something I've been thinking about for several years now, and it's this concept of what do we do when all the jobs are gone? Now, it's not uncommon in the history of our civilized society for certain jobs or certain types of jobs to just disappear. And what we're going to do when that happens. In the UK here, we had situations with things like coal mines, where running up to the 1970s, coal mining was a big business, and there were some parts of the country, well, England and Wales, where whole communities and whole villages were just built around coal mines, and coal mining was everything. And then suddenly, over what was a relatively short period, the coal mines were gone, and there were large groups of people who all they knew about was coal mining. That's all they knew. That's all they'd ever done their whole life since they first joined the working world. They'd worked in coal mines. Suddenly that's gone, and they're lost. And that's just an example. My personal industry is engineering, and more specifically shipbuilding. But since I went into that industry in 1988, it's been on a steady decline. And to be honest, it was declining when I went into it. So, you can question my judgment on that if you like. But it's been dying out. And whilst there's still shipbuilding in this country, or not in this country, but in the UK in general, it's in very isolated places. It's no longer on the south coast of England where I am. It's up in Scotland. So, it's not outside the realms of possibility for the job you're working in to just suddenly be gone. But what do we do about it? I mean, it seems foolish to just sit here and complain, but not actually be thinking of a solution. But what can that solution be? What do we do? There's obviously the idea of retraining to go into another career, or in fact, I wouldn't even want to call it a career, because who knows what a career means nowadays. Let's just say retraining to go into another job. But I mean, that's easier said than done. Like the situation I'm in, for example, is I left a full-time job September of last year, which I'll explain at some point in another video. But since then, I've been what I call as semi-self-employed. So not unemployed, because I've not been claiming any unemployed benefits or anything. I've been doing self-employed work, including obviously making these videos, and also a video game that I've been working on, which is now available to buy on Steam. But unfortunately, those self-employed channels haven't really been making me enough money to really live on. And they're not, they're in no way equal to actually doing a full-time job working for somebody else. So it's not as though I can just say, well, I'm now self-employed. So I'm kind of in this limbo where I actually really need to get another full-time job, but I can't just sit here every day, because to be quite honest, to search through the job listings every day takes me about 10 minutes, because that's how few actual jobs there are. And I'm not talking about just filtering it down to to a specific job that I'm looking for. That's just literally going to, for instance, this area and in a 5 or 10 mile radius and just searching through every job that's been added in the last 24 hours, and that takes about 10 minutes. So once I've done that, what do I do for the rest of the day? I'm not going to just sit there and say, oh, well, woe is me, I can't find anything. So I'm obviously trying to do some other self-employed things on the side. But, like I say, at this stage of the game, if I want to actually pay the bills and be able to afford to eat and and have heat and a roof over my head, I need to find another I need to find another job, or I need to make self-employment work, because for a lot of us, self-employment might be the only option we have left. And obviously, when I say self-employment, I mean anything along the lines of, creating stuff to sell on Etsy is self-employment. Making videos and uploading them to YouTube, once you start to earn an income from it, it's self-employment, and then, until then it's kind of a hobby, to be honest. And like I say, being a sort of indie games developer, again, it's a hobby until you actually publish something and get some money for it, really. But that's all forms of self-employment. But it's one of those things that you have to start seriously thinking about, because like I say, there's no guarantee that whatever job you do, it's going to be there forever. So especially the way things go now with, obviously we have the AI thing that gets brought up a lot, where people's jobs are being replaced by AI. But even before that, companies were outsourcing work to third world countries where people would work for pennies a day. So all that's actually happening is companies have realised, well, instead of paying third world workers pennies a day, we can now get AI to do it for nothing. So it's there's always been these issues here of companies are trying to pay the minimum for for the most work. So anybody who lives in a fairly affluent country where they expect a certain wage to maintain a certain standard of living are always going to be the first ones out when companies are trying to cut costs. That's obviously the way it's going to go. If you expect to be able to pay for your Netflix or your satellite TV or your whatever, your electric car or whatever else you're spending your money on, then companies are going to want to get shot of you. So the main issue is, how do we tackle this problem? Do we wait until it actually happens to us and then get into a panic about it, or do we start taking steps beforehand? Because I know from my experience that every time I move on from a job, it's becoming more and more difficult to find another one. When I do spend my hour searching through the job listings in the morning, most of the jobs on there now are either to do with teaching, which I'm not qualified to do, healthcare, which I'm not qualified to do, or sales, which I don't have the people skills to do, and I never will have. I'm not a salesman. I can't talk people into buying something that they don't want to buy. I'm not that sort of person. So that's the three main types of jobs that are out there, and I'm not qualified to do any of them. Of course, there's also the kind of, I don't know whether race to the bottom mentality is the correct word, but where everybody's just taking jobs that they're overqualified for just to get something to pay the bills. But the problem with that is, every time you step down a level, the competition's increasing, because every level you move down, there's more and more people who are actually also qualified for that job. And ultimately, the job's probably going to go to the person who's going to be prepared to work for the least, which is the person who doesn't have that many options. Whereas, us people who have got slightly complacent in our kind of, our high flying careers, where we expect a certain salary and we expect a certain lifestyle, we're going to be less likely to accept, what somebody who's been struggling all their life is going to accept. So we're sort of stuck. It's sort of an example of when people talk about the death of the middle class. Basically now, unless you're upper class and you're loaded, we're all just working class, and we're all fighting for the same scraps of jobs that are left behind. So what do we do? Do we just sit here and moan about it, or do we take control of our own lives and say, well, look, what are we supposed to do? It's no good just getting up every morning, searching through the few job listings there are and just being miserable, or applying to 100 different jobs a week and just being rejected from all of them because because the company thinks that you're stuck up because you used to work in an office and now you're applying to work in a warehouse. So they think you're going to have ideas above your station, so they end up just hiring somebody who's worked in warehouses all their life. Is that what we're going to do? We're just going to sit there and moan about it and complain, a bit like I'm doing now, or are we going to take steps and say, well, look, we need to find a solution to this? And the solution isn't necessarily just everybody becoming self-employed and making YouTube videos, because there's only a finite audience out there, and for everybody who's successful, there are just as many people who are failing in doing it. But I think again, it's got to that stage where we all have to take some sort of responsibility for our lives. I don't think we can just say, well, the government promised that they'd look after me if I did everything, and I was a good worker bee and I did everything that was asked of me, then the government would look after me, and there would always be a job for me, and then when I was too old to work, there would be a pension for me to support me in my old age. Well, those days are gone. You've got to pretty much from the day you're old enough to think for yourself, you've got to start learning to take care of yourself and realise that nobody else is going to do it for you. Otherwise, you end up in a dire sort of state. Like, well, look at the example of the salarymen in Japan. Now, in Japan, all through the boom periods, the sort of post-war boom periods into the 80s and 90s, it was always, in Japan, if you got a good corporate job and you became a salaryman, as they were called, then you'd be set up for life. You'd be in that company corporate structure, and that would be it for life. But then that started to fail and people started to get laid off. But because of the way Japanese culture is, these salarymen were so embarrassed about the fact of being laid off that they didn't want the neighbours to know that they were unemployed. So every morning they would put on their suits, as they normally do, pick up their briefcase. They would leave the house at the same time they normally did, and they would all go and gather in a local park and just sit there all day, and then come home in the evening at the time they'd normally come home, carrying a briefcase again, and go back in the house, just so the neighbours still thought they were going to work every day, because they couldn't stand the embarrassment of people thinking that there must be something wrong with them because they'd been ejected from this supposedly safe corporate structure, which nobody ever gets ejected from. So imagine how bad they must be if they've been made unemployed. But it was just a fact of life and the fact of the way corporate structure was changing. But they'd relied on it so heavily that suddenly they were just they were lost, and they just didn't know what to do. And we're in that same situation again, where we kind of wait until it's too late and think that whoever we vote for is going to be there to help us, and and we think, well, if we vote these people out and we vote these people in, well, they've promised to sort all this out and look after us. But no, it never happens. It's just the same people, but wearing a different shirt and a different tie, and we're still facing the same problems. So, like I say, I think we sort of need to take responsibility, but I can't give all the solutions. I don't know how we go about it, but it's kind of up to all of us. However safe we currently think our jobs are, it's easy for a company to suddenly decide they want to move to a different part of the country, and they just say to you, well, you've got a choice. You can either up your roots and move with us, or you can volunteer and take redundancy. And it's as simple as that. You don't necessarily get any prior warning about it. You just suddenly find out one day that that's what's happening. The company's decided it's cheaper for them to move somewhere else, or that the council in this other area has offered to give them a big handout if they move all their operations to that area. And then they're going to do it because the council in the area where they're currently based has tried to put pressure on them for, I don't know, more taxes or something to upset them, and they just up and move. Or perhaps the cost of living's too high where they currently are, and the workers want too much money, so they think, well, okay, if we move to this part of the country, the cost of living's lower, the workers are going to want less money, so we can make a saving by moving. It's cheaper to uproot the whole company and relocate the whole company and its offices, buildings, whatever, its whole facilities. It's cheaper to move them there than it is to keep paying you the wage that you've been expecting from them. And that's the way, that's the way the company mindset works when there's shareholders there who want profits. So, yeah, that's it. We need to, we need to take responsibility. Don't wait for it to happen to you. Don't, we can't say it's never going to happen to us. We have to at least prepare for it. However well we think we're doing in our corporate structure, and however sort of indispensable we think we are to the business, it can soon happen. So yeah, don't wait for it to happen and then get caught out. Start putting your plans in place as soon as you possibly can. Anyway, that's enough of my yapping, but I think it's something that I say we seriously have to think about. I'm in a situation now where I don't have that many options. I'm stuck in the middle, especially at my slightly more advanced age. It becomes more difficult. I turned 55 this year, which is the age at when I started working. Getting on for nearly 40 years ago now. 55 was the age when some people would take an early retirement. Now it's the age when I'm sat here thinking, what job am I going to be doing for the next 20 years? Retirement is, far in the distance. So, anyways, that's my thought for the day. That's the primary thing that's been bugging me. Somehow bills have to be paid, but what do we do when the jobs aren't there? Let me know what you think in the comments. Give me your views. Let me know if this has affected you, if you're dealing with these sort of issues and how you've sort of overcome them. Until then, take care of yourself. Look after number one, because you're the only one who truly cares about you. And I'll see you soon. Bye for now.